You are live.
Please rise as you are able. I now call this meeting of City Council to order.
We acknowledge that this meeting is taking place in the traditional land of the Anishinaabe people. The Anishinaabe include the Odawa, Ojibwe, and Potawatomi nations, collectively known as the Three Fires Confederacy. We're dedicated to honoring Indigenous history and culture and committed to moving forward in the spirit of reconciliation and respect with all First Nations, Métis, and Inuit people. You may be seated. Well, good evening, everyone. Tonight's City Council meeting is being held virtually with members of Council, the Executive Management Team, Deputy City Clerk, and the City Clerk participating via video conference. Members of the Senior Leadership Team who have reports on tonight's agenda are not visible, but are available to answer any questions at Council tonight. However, this will be our last virtual City Council meeting, hopefully for good. As we are returning to the chambers after March break next week. There is no meeting next week because of March break, but after that we'll be returning, and that is in conjunction with lifting the state of emergency. So this morning I signed the declaration to lift the state of emergency in the city of Barrie, and that is of course aligned with the province's easing of provincial COVID-19 public health measures and the improving situation overall. We have been in a state of emergency for almost 2 years. The state of emergency was declared, if you can believe it, on March 23rd, 2020. It was part of the city's ongoing efforts, obviously, to slow the spread of COVID-19, allowed us to continue to act and move more quickly in response to the pandemic while offering our services to the people of Barrie. And I did want to say, you know, we've been through an awful lot, but we could not have done that without the people who continued to go to work every day, who didn't have the option to not go to a place of work, our essential workers and our incredible community partners. That's everybody from first responders and healthcare workers to grocery workers, PSWs, delivery workers, everybody who continued to show up every single day all the way through the pandemic. And it is by no means over, but this is a day in which we are lifting the state of emergency and hopefully continuing down the path towards some kind of normal. I do want to particularly thank the staff at the Simcoe Muskoka District Health Unit and at Royal Victoria Hospital for their tremendous and tireless work over the last 2 years. That work continues, and it continues in vaccine clinics. It continues in investigating and protecting people from outbreaks, and the continued work, of course, that RVH does every day despite the conditions. And I also wanted to say, of course, an enormous thank you to city staff who've shown a great deal of resiliency and adaptability and resourcefulness, whether working at home or working at their place of work, especially, and those on the front line dealing with members of the public, and of course, especially first responders. And I did also want to thank members of the Emergency Operations Committee. These are leaders from the city, Barrie Police, RVH, and the Simcoe Health Unit, who did meet regularly to make decisions throughout the pandemic and our efforts to reduce the spread of COVID-19, react to changing public health circumstances and regulations. Always, everything that group did was focused on keeping our community safe. And once again, if you can, I did want to say the pandemic's not over. The city will continue to monitor the COVID situation. We hope that there won't need to be new restrictions of any kind in the future. But that depends on us obviously continuing to observe the new normal as it is today. And even as today, as vaccine clinics continue, I appreciate those who are going out and continuing to get vaccinated. Once again, if you can, please support local businesses, particularly those in the hospitality and personal service sectors who were closed in some cases for many months. They've got a big hole to dig themselves out of in many cases. And as much as all levels of government have attempted to help, the best help we can give them is our support. So please continue to do that at barrie.ca/support for businesses. You can learn more about the programs that are out there to help our businesses recover as we move forward in COVID-19. And of course, the COVID-19 updates continue at the Simcoe-Muskoka District Health Unit's website. So we did want to make that announcement tonight as we're moving out of the state of emergency and towards, we'll see what our new normal brings for us, but appreciate so much as well the residents of Barrie who went out, got vaccinated in very high numbers, and most of all those who, from little things to big things throughout the pandemic, cared for each other, from doing deliveries, food deliveries, essential supplies, looking in on neighbors, helping people get to appointments, all the 1,000 little acts of kindness that were demonstrated by people who care for each other in our community, and thank you for that. Okay, we're going to move on, and it seems anticlimactic to go to confirmation of the minutes, but that's what we do first at a meeting like this. The minutes of the meeting held February 14th have been circulated. Any corrections to the minutes, members of council? Seeing none, minutes are adopted as printed and circulated. We do not have any awards and recognition reports from officers or deputations tonight. There are no tax applications on tonight's agenda or communication matters, which means we can go straight to the committee reports. Deputy Mayor Ward, I believe you have the motions.
Moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Thompson, that Section A of the General Committee report dated February 28th, 2022 as circulated be received.
I think it's moved by Deputy Mayor Ward, seconded by Councillor Thompson, that Section A of the General Committee report dated February 28th, 2022 as circulated be received. This is to receive the report of the Council Compensation Review Committee meetings from January 7th and February 4th, the report of the City Building Committee from February 8th, and the report of the Council Comp Review Committee dated February 11th. The motions are separate. This is just to receive the reports. Comments or questions on Section A? Seeing none, those in favor of Section A, please indicate. Is anyone opposed? None, that carries. Section B, please.
Moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Thompson, that Section B of the General Committee report dated February 28th, 2022 as circulated be adopted.
It's moved by Deputy Mayor Ward, seconded by Councillor Thompson, that Section B of the General Committee report dated February 28th, 2022 as circulated be adopted. These are the consent items from General Committee on February 28th. Comments or questions on Section B? Seeing none, those in favor of Section B, please indicate. And nobody's opposed, that carries. Section C, please.
Moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Thompson, the General Committee report dated, the Section C of General Committee report dated February 28th, 2022 as circulated be adopted.
Thank you. It's moved by Deputy Mayor Ward, seconded by Councillor Thompson, that Section C of the General Committee report dated February 28th, 2022 as circulated be adopted. This is the Barrie Arts Advisory Committee's mandate and strategic priorities. Any comments on Section C? Seeing none, call the question. Those in favor of Section C? Is anyone opposed? None. Carries. Section D, please.
Moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Thompson, that Section D of the General Committee report dated February 28th, 2022 as circulated be adopted.
Thank you. It's moved by Deputy Mayor Ward, seconded by Councillor Thompson, that Section D of the General Committee report dated February 28th, 2022 is circulated be adopted. This is the motion from the report of the Council Compensation Review Committee. Councillor Thompson, I believe you have an amendment.
Thank you, Mayor Lehman. I'll put the motion on the floor as printed with an amendment. That motion 22G041 of Section D of the General Committee report dated February 28th, 2022 be amended by deleting the following words in paragraph 2C, and members of council.
Okay, we We have an amendment. It's moved by Councillor Thompson, seconded by Councillor Jim Harris, that motion 22G41 of section D of the General Committee report dated February 28th, 2022 be amended by deleting the following words in paragraph 2C. The words are, and members of council. Councillor Thompson, if you care to introduce that.
Thanks, Marilyn. I held the item last week just to have discussion, because I think that getting everybody on council's perspective and everything, and I think there was some great conversation, and we had some questions that we received some information back pertaining to the OMERS pension portion. And at this time, I just feel that this is the one thing that we could probably eliminate from this, and that's why I've moved the amendment forward. So, and I hope that my colleagues will support that.
Thanks, Councillor Thompson. On the amendment, members of council, comments? Councillor Harvey.
Thank you, Mayor Lehman. As I obviously supported this direction last week and then removed the amendment pending the additional information, I again will support it. I just don't think this is the time to be adding OMERS right across the board. Obviously, we are behind the times with the mayor's position not being included in OMERS, but I don't think that at this point we can really justify adding all of council to that. And the other piece, I know there was some arguments across the table last week when this was discussed, talking about how it would potentially prohibit some people from being attracted to doing this position. And I'll be quite honest with you, I don't think any one of us around this table is here for the money, because if that was the case, I don't think any one of us would be here, because it's not the greatest paying job, even with the increase. And to be quite honest with you, if you throw in that OMERS equation into it, that's almost $3,900 a year that the member would have to be paying into that pension also, which would decrease their take home by $149 every 2 weeks, which would then put the take home below the $1,000 mark. So I just don't see that it's quite as attractive as some might think. And depending on the age of those that would be running, they would have to wait a long, long time before they'd be able to collect any of that OMERS money that they would have accrued for whether it's 1 or 2 terms, because typically you don't see, other than Barry Ward, he is the exception, you typically don't see people around the table here for 18 years. So kudos to Barry for keeping the residents happy, and obviously being reelected time and time again. Those are my comments, Mayor Lehman.
Thanks, Councillor Harvey. Councillor McCann.
Thank you, Mayor Lehman. And maybe before I start discussion, I can maybe let Councillor Harvey, or remind Councillor Harvey that I'm the funny one here. And so I'm really glad that Councillor Thompson brought this forward again today, because last week I was really on the verge of siding with him. There was no amendment put forward, and I'm in complete agreement with Councillor Thompson and Councillor Harvey. I think that right now is the wrong time. And just to let anybody who is thinking about running for council next term, they can bring this up again next term, and they can vote on it, and they can actually change this when they're in council next week. So I'll be supporting this amendment, Councillor Harvey. And really, I've got nothing else to add other than what Councillor Harvey said. So thank you.
Okay, on Councillor Thompson's amendment, I did see another card. Councillor Conkle. Yeah, go ahead.
Thank you, Mayor Lehman. I actually wasn't sure about this, because I deeply respect and did want to comment about the work that the committee went into it. And on the points around the terms and making assumptions that individuals may want more flexibility on where they choose to spend the honorarium that they would receive in such a position, I am leaning towards supporting the amendment and removing the OMERS from being a prescriptive option for all members of council. But I was hoping, we didn't hear from members of the committee at a citizen level, we did from staff. So I wanted to pause just to see if there were any other comments, if we hadn't touched on any context setting, because I did go back and I have been going through the committee's deliberations. I do really respect the work and effort and consideration. but I wanted to just open the floor to staff to see if there was anything else, knowing that you've provided a lot of content around the impact or how benefits look, including OMERS versus the car allowance. So I wanted just to see if we're missing anything.
Sure. Madam Clerk, I don't know if you can provide any further, or Ms. McAlpine, go ahead.
Mayor Lehman, thank you. And on behalf of CAO Prowse, this is the committee's recommendation, and the clerk and staff in HR, Brian DeWolf-Smith in particular, have provided support to the committee, but the committee's recommendation is what's brought forward, not a recommendation from staff.
Thank you for that. And I did want to also express my appreciation to staff for the detailed information, because it was interesting to see how, regardless of municipalities deeming members of council to be full-time or part-time, they were all categorized as full-time. And so to that, I guess I would just make a final comment to say, I will support Councillor Thompson's amendment. I would look to the clerk. I'm assuming that committee is now closed. I'm not sure if there is another meeting. But I was wondering if this would be an interesting question to ask individuals running for the next municipal election, if there was a question part of that nomination package. So I know information is already structured to come out of the recommendations of this around the role of deputy mayor, the role of council and whatnot. But I was wondering if that would be an opportune time to actually get feedback from individual candidates that are choosing to run, if having access to a pension makes a difference or would have been seen to be a benefit. And that might be some interesting feedback should this be brought up again in the future.
Thanks for that, Councillor Kungle.
So I'll ask Wendy if it's possible to take that back to the committee if they're still running, or if not,
Sure, okay. So yep, question, Madam Clerk.
Through you, Mayor Lehman, to Councillor Kungle. The committee's work is done because this is their final report, but we can certainly investigate as staff looking to put something in the nomination package, because we have the responsibility of, my office has the responsibility of putting the nomination package together. So we can certainly look into that and structure maybe a question to potential candidates.
Thank you. And that's all my comments, Mayor Lehman.
Thanks, Councillor Kungle. Councillor Riepma.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And I'm in support of the amendment. It might have been different if it wasn't a requirement that everybody gets in or everybody gets out. Because I think that if there was a personal option, that might change my view of it. But given that everybody has to be in or everybody has to be out, my concern is that it's almost $4,000, and we're trying to attract people who may not, normally be attracted to that, to run for council, younger people and diverse people, and $4,000 a year may be an awful lot of money for them. And so that's why I'm supporting the amendment. Hopefully we will attract people who are not of real significant means and are able to partake in leadership. So I'm supportive.
Thanks, Councillor Riepma. Any other comments on the amendment? Councillor Natalie Harris.
Thank you, Mayor Lehman. Yeah, this one's been a tricky one for me. I'm with the rest of council who've mentioned that they have a difficulty with that it has to be all or nothing, even though it is a part-time role. OMERS, for whatever reason, still categorizes it as a full-time position, and that's why we all have to come together as one. And I definitely understand what about $300 a month would feel like if that didn't come to help pay rent, etc., and groceries. So I'm pretty sure I'm going to vote in favor of this, but it's difficult because I wanted to vote for it originally because I do like the progressive thought of having OMERS as part of all of City Council for sure. But with doing the dollars and actually looking at and this is my income. This is, I get it. That amount away from even my paycheck is a significant amount for me to pay my bills. And therefore, look, in the future, there will be city councillors, I'm sure, that might not have a full-time job in another position as well. And this is their income as well. So I'm happy that we can, a new council can review it again if they want to come back, and because I am very grateful for the work that the committee did as well. It was a lot of hard work, and I'm happy that they made this recommendation. I think it's great that they put it in front of us and gave us this opportunity and option to vote it in. But because it really does make this a blanket yes or no for all of us, I'm going to have to go with voting in favor of the amendment.
Okay, thanks, Councillor Harris. Any other comments on the amendment? Councillor Irwin.
Thank you, Mayor Lehman. I just had a question, perhaps for staff. I think Councillor Kungol's exchange with Ms. McAlpine was interesting there about the committee's view on this and their recommendations, because I definitely am inclined to support the committee's recommendation with all the work that they've put into this. And looking through the report another time, there's not much in terms of the reasoning and justification behind this particular recommendation. I'm wondering if staff, or if there's a member of the committee present or something who could maybe shine a bit more light on the justification for this, so we can hear that in this conversation.
Okay, so is there somebody who could speak to, in addition to what's in the report? Ms. McAlpine, or? Yeah, go ahead.
Thank you, Mayor Lehman. I'll refer this matter to the city clerk, since she was in attendance at the meetings. I don't believe there's more than the fact that it's actually provided by comparator municipalities, but Ms. Cook can correct me if there's something more than that.
Okay, Mrs. Cook.
Through you, Mayor Lehman, to Councillor Irwin. Yeah, it was because the comparator municipalities, they supplied an OMERS program to their members of council. We didn't really dig too deep into how that came about, whether it was from a council compensation review. We just did like a standard survey to our comparator municipalities. There's also a member of our committee, Mr. Chris Rovert, on the call. He was one of the ones that actually put this recommendation on the floor. If you want to hear from him, that might be helpful.
That's fantastic.
Yeah, I guess I'll allow it, but we had already decided that unfortunately under procedure we couldn't hear from the committee directly, which is now being changed. So we'll answer the question quickly, but really the chair of the committee should be here speaking if we're going to hear directly from the committee. Mr. Rovert, could you give us a little information though, since you're here? We can hear you, Chris. Go ahead. Nope, maybe we can't hear you. Sorry, Chris. It does look like Mr. Rovert is not muted. Can we try and get him back in? Oh, there we go. Now we can hear you. Go ahead, Chris.
Okay, so you can hear me. Good stuff. To just give a quick little oversight, usually it'd be our chair that would speak on this, but thank you for reaching out. I appreciate the opportunity. The OMERS did come up mainly because of the comparators. When we looked at the other 10 cities, we analyzed pretty much what they had in line, already in place. And we saw that Barrie was, pardon the expression, but was behind the 8 ball with a lot of line items. So what we tried to do is establish a baseline to bring all the other comparators in line on an average basis, and then saw where the deficiencies were from a Barrie perspective, the councillor's perspective. And then we just tried to bring those up to that average amount. Hence the mayor's salary got a large jump to the average of all the other comparators. And when we also specifically looked at the OMERS component of it, the OMERS was quite prevalent with the other cities as well. And there are several other cities, if I remember correctly, without me pulling up my report on my laptop here, the population was not as great as Barrie either. I think, I forget, I think it was Councillor Kungle mentioned it last week that it's and also with Councillor Morales, last week, Barrie needs to look on the forward thinking of things and what will be attracting the new councillors to be a councillor for Barrie. And a lot of it was looking at a rounded position, not just of the salary, but of the benefits that were part of it. We examined what you currently have in place, and then we looked at what the OMERS pension would have. We also looked at, as you saw in our report, the health spending account, which I was not much in favor of because the additional costs that were involved in it. We gravitated more closely to the OMERS pension because it gave more bang for the buck. So looking at from the OMERS perspective of the pension, I don't want to say it, but I will. I think it's a little short-sighted for council to dismiss it because it actually is your retirement that you're actually going to be investing in, whether it's 1 term, 2 terms, or even 3 terms, or as Deputy Mayor Ward has 18 years. You know, this is an investment in your future. So the additional $300 that you might see on a monthly basis coming out of your paycheck, that's part of your retirement package. And if you happen to retire before 50 or 55 years of age or leave the OMERS pension, you take the commuted value of that as well. So that plays a large role in the future of your remuneration package. So the additional cost to the individual and the cost to the city, I don't see it being all that much on the overall big picture of things. So hopefully that gives you a little bit better perspective from my perspective sitting on the committee and what the rationale was behind the thrust of the OMERS pension side of things.
Okay, thanks very much, Mr. Robert. On behalf of the committee, Councillor Aylwin, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mayor Lehman, and thank you so much for those comments and that answer, and thank you for allowing that, Mayor Lehman, that exchange. I really appreciate that. I think in the future it would be helpful to hear from members of the committee who have drafted a report, just like with the task forces. I think that worked really well. So just future reference, I guess. But I found that comment very helpful. And, you know, I really struggle with voting against the recommendation from the committee. Although I do hear the points on both sides of this issue. So I'll leave it at that. Thanks.
Thanks, Councillor Owen. Yeah, now I'm sure there's more speakers. Go ahead, Councillor Morales, and Councillor Jim Harris, you're next.
Thank you, Mayor Lehman. I'll be voting against the amendment. I think one of the points that has been brought up that you know, council in Barrie, as it is right now, is not usually or meant to be a full-time job, and other people, they're not getting it for the money. I think that very point should be a reason to vote against this amendment. We don't want to add to it. Obviously, we're not creating it by an amendment single-handedly overnight, but we don't want to add to the conditions that make serving on Barrie Council something that only people who have the means to do can do. Governance shouldn't be for those with necessarily family wealth or small businesses or the fortunate situation to do so. It should be for anybody, and that means somebody who that should be somebody who right now maybe does make a similar wage, so $40,000, and goes, you know what? For 4 years, I want to switch over. I want to switch over and serve my community, but I just can't make the numbers work because the place where they're at right now, where they make roughly the same, does pension matching and contribution. So this is the kind of initiative that's going to bring those more diverse voices that in situations where it doesn't have those little things all added up together, might exclude them. So this is why I'm going to be voting against the amendment. Again, that very point that people don't get in it to be rich, that's exactly why backs up the point why I'm voting against the amendment. And I think, again, as Mr. Rover said, we're not just thinking about, obviously it's not for the current council, and we're not just talking about the future councils, we're talking about the future leadership. And that might be somebody who has humble means who is on a CPP, so somebody of older age, who something like this, it's going to maybe take away a little bit of cash now from that term, but it might work out if they, if they're nice and healthy and have a little bit more time to enjoy retirement. In addition, it's for younger generations. So again, a lot of has been said about younger generations, more diverse generations. I think we should be listening to those voices. And on something as small as this, if the goal is to reduce the overall increase, I'd be happy to support an amendment that reduces our conference budget or anything like that, but not at the expense of this.
Okay, thanks, Councilor Morales. Councilor Jim Harris, you haven't spoken yet. Go ahead.
Great. Yeah, thank you, Mayor Lehman. I wasn't, but it seems like we've got a lot more into this than I expected. But I just, again, want to thank the committee. I think, this is an important piece of work and something that was obviously trusted to them, and they did a great job. And I do respect, understand, and having spoken with the clerk who was with this committee throughout each step, that the OMERS came on very late, which may in part explain why the questions we had and we received in our package for this week were not answered prior. They were something that came up later. So, but I understand that there's a process and the OMERS came up late. I also recognize that when we gave them the guiding principles, the first bullet was attracting, retaining diverse, talented, experienced, engaged candidates for council. And this was important. And so I would ask maybe through you, Mayor Lehman, I think I know the answer, but I just wanted to double check. It's a pretty big task to do that for a committee. And maybe through to the clerk, did we do any investigation or research, evidence, peer-reviewed articles on how you make a compensation package that attracts diverse, talented, experienced, engaged candidates for council?
Good question. Madam Clerk.
Through you, Mayor Lehman, to Councillor Jim Harris. We did do a lot of research through other municipalities, but we didn't do any peer reviews per se. We did talk about the candidates package quite a bit and how to, and the committee gave some input on how we could beef up the candidates package to attract some diverse candidates, but we did not do any additional research.
Okay, thank you. And I gather that. I think in what we're hearing, and I appreciate the opinions that have been expressed by council and the care and concern behind those opinions, but we have no evidence, we have no facts, we have no information that says, here's why we recommend this, how it actually helps to retain diverse, talented, experienced, and engaged candidates for council. So I'm in favor of what Councillor Thompson had presented. And I think, in the sense of, the draw away from this honorarium, it's not sorry, it's called honorarium for good reason. It's not a salary. Remember that too. And I asked the history of honorarium being used versus salary, and they're not, because they're not staff, they're employees of the city. And I also really appreciate the addition of the committee's comments about here's in your package what you can expect as a councillor, including committees and other things. I think it's really, really valuable. And even if I can go so far as to say, really, I mean, I know salary is important, but the most important issue related to council is time. It's time. And if you look at this council, part-time students, full-time students, retired people, consultants, business people, full-time workers, workers who commute, a lot of different work experiences in this council. So I think what I would say is that the group's done a great job with this package. I do think the OMERS is, based on the evidence that we received in the past week, is a bit too much too soon. So I appreciate all the other elements and we'll vote for those. But right now on the OMERS, I will be supporting Councillor Thompson. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Harris. I think the only member of council who hasn't had their chance to speak is Deputy Mayor Ward. Did you have any comments on the amendment, Deputy Mayor Ward, before I call the question?
Yeah, I've heard my name mentioned many times tonight in the debate. Yeah. The only thing I wanted to say was that I think when council becomes a full-time job, it will be justified to be part of OMERS. And we're almost there, but I don't think we're quite there. Maybe in another 4 years, maybe 8 years, I think council will be at the point where it will become a full-time job. And at that point, I think they should look at, I think at that point, a good argument could be made for adding OMERS, but I won't be supporting it tonight.
Thanks, Deputy Mayor Ward. And I'll just a couple of thoughts before I call the question from me. I am going to vote for the amendment. I understand the argument that's being made. I think we could maybe have a debate or a second guess as to whether mandating the requirement for you to contribute $3,500 out of your salary to a pension is actually a benefit or not to attracting young people to council, whether it's a benefit to attracting those on modest income or not. I think if your priority is the amount of money you need every week, that might not be a positive for everyone, notwithstanding it is a good pension plan. The other thing to be aware of, though, I think it's important out there is, on a councillor's honorarium, the OMERS pension benefit is not going to be significant, even with many, many deputy mayor ward type service, many years of service. So I'm not sure this is as enormous an impact either way as maybe we might fear it to be. That being said, I take the point that the committee recommended it, and there are other municipalities that support it. I'm with Deputy Mayor Ward, though. I think when the council position becomes full-time, that's when it's appropriate to look at this. And in the meantime, I'm not sure it is. The only other thing I wanted to say before I call the question is I do think the committee chair should be able to come and speak at general committee. I think that was not a good choice that we made. And next time, maybe we can change that. Although, to be fair, it's never happened before. Our council compensation review committee, in part because we want it to be independent. That's the whole point of a council compensation review committee. They've submitted their report and there's no back and forth with council. They give us their best advice in written form. Council takes that advice and moves forward. But I think, this year demonstrated, this discussion we've had, that there is some value to having the ability to ask questions of the committee, and notwithstanding their they have to present the recommendations of the committee, and the chair properly should do that. It is helpful to have that answer. The chair did circulate some thoughts to council, and I wanted to just make a few of them public here because, first of all, an enormous thank you to her, Kelly Patterson McGrath, for chairing the Council Compensation Review Committee, and also to Danielle, Steve, Chris, Brandy, and Wendy, along with the city staff who worked on the committee. Thank you very much for your work. There was, and to Brian DeWolf-Smith, who the chair recognizes was a wealth of knowledge and providing information to them and doing their work. Thank you, Brian. I know you're on the call, and rightly so. The chair, Ms. McGrath, said, I would encourage everyone in our community to get involved, participate, and have their say on committees. And she did note that some of the issues we were talking about last week, ward boundaries is a separate process, as members of council know. That is a formal process under the Act and has to be pursued in a specific way under the Municipal Elections Act. But attracting diverse, talented, experienced, and engaged candidates is an important factor for the current future development of the city, and compensation plays an important role in that. They all felt strongly about that on the committee. And with the growth in the city, which the committee noted this time, and that's not something they've noted in the past, in prior council compensation committee reports, sort of tangentially, but I am glad that the committee put that first and foremost and considered that in the recommendations, because it shows you how the job is changing. It has changed even in this term of council in terms of the additional demands, not just from the unusual circumstances, but because of the nature and pace of growth of the city, and especially how quickly it's changing with the real estate market and the pace of planning applications that we're all dealing with as councillors. The last thing to say, she wanted to mention reiterating providing a clear and robust candidate package, including as much detail as possible, so potential candidates have more information on the various opportunities for committees and so on they may be interested in, time commitments and processes. And that's very good advice. And I trust future councils will do that as part of onboarding, but obviously now, as part of the nomination package, that's great advice to the clerk's office. So all of that to say, notwithstanding the information and the recommendation, I am actually going to vote in favor of the amendment on this one. But I really did want to say how much I appreciated all of the committee's work and put some of that on the table before I called the question. Okay, and with that, I will call the question. Those in favor of the amendment? And those opposed? 2. I'm in favor as well, of course. Okay, the amendment does carry, and on the main motion as amended, I might have saved a couple of those thank yous for now, but having said that, is there anything else anyone would like to say? Okay, if not, I'll call the question. On the motion as amended, those in favor? None opposed. That carries unanimously. Thank you, and thank you again to members of the committee for your service. Deputy Mayor Ward, Section E, please.
Moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Thompson, that Section E of the General Committee report dated February 28th, 2022 as circulated be adopted.
Thank you. It's moved by Deputy Mayor Ward, seconded by Councillor Thompson, that Section E of the General Committee report dated February 28th as circulated be adopted. This is the investigation to construct professional grade pickleball courts. Councillor Kungl, go ahead.
Thank you. Through you, Mayor Lehman, I'd like to table the motion and add an amendment.
Motion's already on the floor. I'm sure
Sorry,
you don't mean to
so
table it. You just want to move an amendment, right? Yep,
Move
go
an
ahead
amendment,
with the
please.
amendment.
Thank
Yep,
you.
go ahead.
That moved by myself and seconded by Deputy Mayor Barry Ward, that motion 22G042 of Section E of the General Committee report dated February the 28th, 2022 be amended to add the following paragraph. So new paragraph 2 being that an outdoor racket sport strategy. Sorry, I'm just rereading how that was referenced. That an outdoor racket sports strategy would provide direction on outdoor pickleball and tennis recreation facilities across the city be included in the 2023 capital budget for council's consideration. There might have been a word missing in what was circulated. So I think it just needs that an outdoor racket sports strategy be developed to provide direction on outdoor pickleball and tennis recreation facilities across the city be included in the 2023 capital budget for council's consideration. And I can speak to that.
Mayor Lehman, you're on mute.
Sorry, that was really 2020 of me. We have an amendment, motion 22G. It's moved by Councillor Kungl, seconded by Deputy Mayor Ward. That motion 22G42 of Section E of the General Committee report be amended to add the following paragraph: that an outdoor racket sports strategy that would provide direction on outdoor pickleball and tennis recreation facilities across the city be included in the 2023 capital budget for council's consideration. And I agree, it's a little awkwardly worded, but I think the intention of the amendment is that as a project would be included in the budget. Is that correct, Councillor Kungl?
That is correct.
Okay, so it's not directing that one be prepared, it's directing that staff include that as a project in the 2023 budget. And if council approved it in the budget, then they would go ahead and do the strategy. Is that correct?
Correct. It's
okay.
Being left up to staff discretion.
Yeah. Okay, go ahead if you'd care to speak to that.
I would, thank you. I would want to make it clear to other members that it is referenced to 2023 because this would come at a bit of an expense should it proceed. It is not aimed to hold up what I'm sure staff are already working on, considering the timelines of the motion that are bringing this back in the coming weeks. But it really does look at our aged strategy, and many of us around the table have been referencing pickleball. Some of us have been having a lot of meetings with staff over the past 2 years on siting and sizing courts. And a lot of that conversation usually comes up around a strategy that doesn't maybe recognize necessarily the growing demand for pickleball, and also what's the best choice when we look at repurposing courts. So how do we use current infrastructure? Where do we invest in net new infrastructure? So while there is an interest in a formal large facility for pickleball, I believe through my conversations with staff, being able to do this will help provide direction both to council and to staff's workload about where we are planning for this type of recreation facility court system. I can take questions if you like.
Thanks, Councillor Kungl. On the amendment, does anyone wish to speak to it? Comments? Councillor Harvey and Councillor Britton.
Thank you, Mayor Lehman. Actually, a question for staff, probably Ms. McAlpine be the best to answer. Not just for pickleball and tennis sports, but just sports in general, whether we're talking about ball diamonds, cricket pitches. Is there not a strategy already in place that would bring those items to us on an annualized basis through the budget process already?
Ms. McAlpine.
Mayor Lehman, through you to Councillor Harvey. There are strategies related, a parks and recreation strategy and an outdoor recreation facility strategy those are aged. I'll use Councillor Kungol's words. And at the time of the most recent update to the outdoor recreation strategy, it was noted that pickleball was a growing sport and would require more analysis of its use within the community because of the rapid change compared to other outdoor court sports and other outdoor sports. And I will defer to Michelle Banfield if she has further comments as those strategies are under her purview. We don't currently have an outdoor racket sports strategy in particular, which is why staff referenced that in the report. But Ms. Banfield may have some additional details that you'd wish to hear from.
Ms. Banfield.
Through you, Mayor Lehman, to Councillor Kungol. Ms. McAlpine said exactly what I would have. We don't have a strategy for outdoor racket sports, and so we would. So that's why we would need to do one.
Great, thank you. And a follow-up question to that, and it's just more around the timing, because this amendment is referencing the 2023 budget. Under the original motion before it got amended, I believe it had different timelines in it. Can staff confirm what the original timeline would have been previous to this amendment?
Ms. McAlpine or Ms. Banfield? Not sure whose shop that would have landed in.
Mayor Lehman, I would defer to Ms. Banfield, or I see Mr.
Mr. Rania-Sundrin. Go ahead, Bella, thanks.
Thank you, Mayor Lehman, and through you to Councillor Harvey. The original motion is related to assessing the courts at Painswick Park. So this outdoor racket sports strategy would not impact those timelines. This strategy would be independent of the implementation of the pickleball courts at Painswick.
Thank you, Mayor Lehman. Maybe I misunderstood the amendment, but I thought the intent of this amendment was pushing the budgetary piece of this to 2023's budget. Am I wrong in reading it that way?
Councillor Kungol, go ahead.
Thank you. Through you, Mayor Lehman, to Councillor Harvey. Yes, it's independent. So it's just pushing the funding that staff would actually have to put into the capital budget from this year to next year, specific to doing the study. So it comes at its own price tag that's not involved in the motion related to Painswick, separate and apart, but it does come at a cost.
Okay, just curious, because there's no dollar value in your particular motion. Is that all being delayed then to 2023?
Through you, Mayor Lehman, it is. So while they are relatable because we're all talking about pickleball and court investment, they're separate from a funding source. So it'll be staff to look at a workload piece in 2023 to actually do the study and then come back and identify the budget ask for that. But the budget ask would not be coming to council for the study in this fiscal year.
Okay, thank you. I will support it then if that's the intent. I was just a little confused with the way the wording was. It seemed to me that it was going to be delaying these potential pickleball courts.
Thanks, Councillor Harvey. Councillor Riepma.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And I think I already have my answer, but I just wanted to confirm with Mr. Rania-Sundrin that this addition would not impact the construction of the Painswick courts or Eastview. As long as that they're not affected, then I'm good with the amendment.
Mr. Rania-Sundrin.
Through you, Mayor Lehman, to Councillor Riepma, that's correct. This will not affect the construction at Eastview or at Painswick. That's correct.
Thanks. Thank you.
Any other comments on the amendment? Councillor Jim here.
Yeah, thank you, Marilyn. I'll be really quick. I like this. Thank you, Councillor Congo. And I like it because it coordinates the effort between the racket sports. I had a great conversation with Mr. Brad Harris, no relation, who's a key in the pickleball. He's also a tennis player as well. So what he really indicated was the interest of really having the tennis community, the the pickleball community coordinated, working together. So I like this, and I think it's a great way to start. And thank you, Councillor Harvey, for the clarification on this doesn't impact what was brought forward last week. So yeah, let's and I thank you, staff, for the answers around. We really haven't seen with the emergence of pickleball this as part of our review of our recreation needs. So I think it's a good amendment at the right time. So thank you. I'll support it.
Thanks, Councillor Harris. Any other comments on the amendment? Okay, seeing none, I'll call the question. Those in favor of the amendment? Is anyone opposed? Councillor Morales, are you opposed or in favor?
I'm in favor. I grabbed the wrong cards.
No, no, you grabbed the right one, just late. That's okay. That makes the vote on the amendment unanimous. On the main motion as amended. Any further comments? Since we will see this soon, I will just call the question. Those in favor of the motion as amended? Anybody opposed? None? That carries. Okay, thanks for that. Thanks, Councillor Congo. Section F, Deputy Mayor Ward.
Moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Thompson, that Section F of the General Committee report dated February 28th, 2022 is circulated be adopted.
Thank you. It's moved by Deputy Mayor Ward, seconded by Councillor Thompson. Section F of the General Committee report dated February 28th as circulated be adopted. This is with regards to no parking anytime on Pepin Court. Comments or questions? Seeing none, those in favor of the motion, Section F? Any opposed to Section F? Okay, that carries. Section G, please.
Moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Thompson, that Section G of the General Committee report dated February 28th, 2022 is circulated be adopted.
Thank you. It's moved by Deputy Mayor Ward, seconded by Councillor Thompson, that Section G of the General Committee report dated February 28th, 2022 is circulated be adopted. This is the Water Operations Branch Drinking Water System Report, Community Art Project Motion, and the request to the Province of Ontario for a plan of action to address joint and several liability. I believe there's an amendment to this one. Councillor Riepma, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. My amendment is to the request to the Province of Ontario for a plan of action to address joint and several liability. Do you want me to deal with that at this point, or?
Yes.
Yep. Okay. Last week, I asked that this matter be referred to staff in the Legal Services Branch to take a look at. In the meantime, legal staff have said, you know what, we've been in support of this kind of thing for a long time, and so therefore there's no point in having legal staff do the work. So let's just move forward with this this recommendation. So moved by myself and seconded by Deputy Mayor Ward, and the motion has been circulated to all of you. I won't read it all because it goes on for a page or more. Essentially, we're asking the province to get on with changing the rules with respect to lawsuits against the city. And you will recall that our insurance premium last budget went up $600,000 over and above what we paid the year before. Not all of it is in relation to this, but a good chunk of it is. And basically the way it works is that if the city and a number of other people get sued, and even if the city's only found 1% liable, we get to pay the whole shot. And it's the whole theory of suing somebody with the deepest pockets, and that way you can get your money. And it's patently unfair to municipalities and has been for many years, and there's no good reason for it. And AMO the Association of Municipalities of Ontario has been doing a lot of work on this subject and has made recommendations to the province to make these changes. And so what we're doing with this resolution is to support AMO and the resolutions, the changes that it is recommending. So happy to answer any questions on that.
Thanks very much, Councillor Riepma. On the amendment, so we do have an amendment, and I won't read it. It is moved by Councillor Riepma and Deputy Mayor Ward, but it is the AMO motion, I believe, Councillor Riepma. We have had a number of these over the years. The province has never fully acted on it. Different governments have sort of done bits and pieces, but it is in front of you, members of council. Are there any comments or questions on the amendment? Okay, I'll simply say this is something that almost bankrupted a township in Eastern Ontario who were found to have to carry 100% of the cost of a lawsuit over a misplaced construction sign that was alleged to have contributed to a car accident. And I won't get into the other details, but it has been a huge problem for the sector, and I know AMO will appreciate us adding our voice. So I'll call the question on the amendment. Those in favor of it, please indicate. Any opposed? None. That carries unanimously. Thank you, Councillor Riepma. On section G as amended, members of council, any further comments? Okay, seeing none, call the question. Those in favor? Any opposed? None. That carries. Thank you. Okay, I think that completes committee reports. Yes, it does. Thank you, Deputy Mayor Ward. Okay. And I believe with that, we have no deferred business or direct motions, and we're able to move to our presentations. We have two presentations this evening. First is by no stranger to Barrie City Council, none other than former Alderman, Councillor Dave Morrison, Chair of the International Relations Committee. And I'm sorry if I pronounce your first name wrong, Kieran Biles-Ho, who's going to be presenting, and they are going to be presenting the new website, International Partners website, an initiative of our International Relations Committee. Over to you, Dave, and welcome, of course, to our virtual council meeting.
Thank you, Mayor Lehman, Your Worship, and members of council. It's a pleasure to be with you this evening, virtually, if not elsewhere. It would be natural under the current circumstances through COVID to assume that international relations has been rather dormant. I mean, we're not able to run any exchanges or go anywhere. However, the truth of the matter is that we've actually been quite busy. And I'm going to bring two of them to your attention. The first one, thanks to the hard work of Bill Sargent, who heads up the Harrogate subcommittee, particularly, and Sherry Harris, a member of your own staff. The two of them worked incredibly hard and have produced these things that we are calling the International Partners banners that are going to be hung in 10 or 12 different places around the community. The first one going up sometime this spring. So I think that's an exciting initiative that'll be brought to your attention a little closer to when they're actually raised. So there has been a lot of hard work done on that. But the rest of our time I'd like to spend with walking through the completely new website that's been designed to represent our city internationally and our partnerships in particular. There was an old website that dealt specifically with the youth versions of this, Youth Ambassadors, and of course, Global Perspectives. And it's always important to note that the Global Perspectives program is a partnership between the City of Barrie and the Simcoe County District School Board. What we have done now is we've re-envisaged this in such a way that it still includes both of our youth programs, but it also now has been expanded to include the 4 international partnerships that are currently functioning. And as a reminder for people, those remain in order of chronology. There's Zweibrücken, Germany, Mariama, Japan, Harrogate, England, and Arras, France. So I think in a moment you're going to see this. As I introduce them, what I'd like to do is point out that Kieran Biles-Ho, who was the web designer for this process, worked incredibly hard with each of the subcommittees who helped design their own, and also, of course, with the city's IT personnel led by John Mastriani, and they've all worked incredibly hard on this. And it's also, I believe, interesting to note that Kieran Biles-Ho is also a participant in this program. He was part of the global program 3 or 4 years ago, and a brilliant young man. And so at this point, thank you for allowing me the opportunity to do this introduction. I'll come back at the end and say a few concluding comments. But at this point, I'd like to turn this over to Kieran Biles-Ho to walk you through the website.
Sounds good. Thanks so much. Can you guys hear me? Perfect. All right. Yeah. So as Dave said, I'm Kieran. I've been working on the website essentially for the past couple months. I'm in second year engineering at Queen's University and currently in Kingston. But yeah, so I was just thinking today we'd kind of go through the website, just talk about essentially what we've been doing and kind of do a demonstration and walkthrough of the actual website. Yeah, so we can kind of just go into that. Yeah, so just kind of a rehash. We're going through an introduction. Essentially, I'll do a quick brief explanation of the programs that are with the International Relations Committee. Mention again the partner cities that Dave already mentioned, and we'll go through the final demonstration. Yeah, so the main purpose of the website was essentially to not only replace the old website, but essentially expand upon it and mention all the other things that the City of Barrie is involved with, specifically relating to the International Relations Committee. So this involves essentially global perspectives, youth ambassadors, and the 4 partner cities. And as you'll see, we kind of find ways to talk about these programs by talking about previous exchanges and interchanges, how to get involved with the programs. And then for our partner cities, we talk about some of the history and how essentially we came to be in relationships with these different. Yeah, so Youth Ambassadors was essentially 25 years old, and it gave essentially exchanges and interchanges to Miriam, Japan, and essentially in the upcoming years, just because the pandemic has kind of stalled progress with running exchanges, we're hoping to have some with Harrogate and Arras. You can contact Dave, and there's information on the website actually about who to contact if you're interested in these exchanges. As for Global Perspectives, I was actually a part of that program that's been running for about 20 years now. It's an amazing experience, and I also leave my information at the end. I highly recommend the program, and if you know anyone who's roughly a grade 10, feel free to reach out to me and ask me questions about that too. But yeah, it's essentially a semester-long program that has exchanges and interchanges to Veradero, Cuba, and Zweibrück in Germany, and that's hosted at Innisdale, and that's available to all essentially schools in the Barrie area. And then just kind of to touch on some of the cities that we partner with, Zweibrück in Germany, Miriam in Japan, Harrogate, United Kingdom, and Arras, France. You can kind of go into more detail about that later on. But yeah, so we can kind of go straight to the website. There's 2 main URLs. Essentially, we wanted to keep the old one just because if anyone's looking for it, we have to show something. So that's why the Youth Ambassadors is there. But it also can be found underneath the international internationalpartners.barrie.ca. So yeah, I'll kind of actually go to that right now. Head over here. Yeah, so here's our essentially main homepage. And as you can see, we have all the main sections, which are the 2 programs and the 4 cities. And if you scroll down, you can see that we have a message from the mayor actually, and message from Dave, who's the IRC chair, and all the sections are kind of outlined. Now, additionally, the website can all be accessed through the top navigation bar, and you can kind of see different things. So if you want to go to say, find out more information about Youth Ambassadors and how it came to be, you can go through the information and pictures here. If you wanted to go to say the application process and figure out how to apply to Global Perspectives, or somebody who is, you can go here and it essentially outlines all the details related to those 2 events. Again, there's testimonials, interchanges, exchanges, program information, and we also have the legacy fund information here, just in case, you need support, running into these programs. They don't want to limit you just because of financial barriers. Yeah, and then we have the 4 sister cities as well. So if we go into Zweibrück, and you can see some of the history here, and there's amazing pictures put together by the IRC committee, just to essentially elaborate on everything that the committee's done in the past. Yeah, there's testimonials again towards the relationships, and you can kind of dive in depth and just see a bunch of essentially the action going on for the past 20-25 years. And then there's also a future section just in case for every section talking about what we're going to do kind of going forward. So that essentially consists of the entirety of the website, and you can go through and you can see a bunch of details and really good graphics and essentially information regarding the website and the IRC committee and the international relations partnerships. I think that's about it on my side. Yeah, if you have any kind of concerns, questions, you want to mention anything about the website, want anything changed, my information is here. If you want specific information to the actual programs and others, like information towards the IRC committee, there's information located at the bottom of the actual website down in this section for who you can reach out to specific, towards specific partnership cities and everything. But yeah, if you have any questions, feel free to ask or email me. Dave, I'll hand it back to you.
Thank you, Kieran. And I want to say once again, just how incredibly impressed I was with the work that you put in. I'm biased, of course, but I think it's a superb job and you did brilliant work, and I'm greatly appreciative of that, as I am of the many others that supplied pictures or language for it. The IT department, John was superb, et cetera, et cetera. Your worship, if I might add, something that I think is extremely important to just always remember is that with our youth programs, we have been dedicated since our first one in 1997 that we would take the best kids, not the richest kids. And to that end, we've always been extremely well supported within the business community. But we have recently started something called the Youth Ambassadors Legacy Fund to ensure that youth, both in the Youth Ambassadors program and in Global Perspectives, continue to be supported for decades to come, long after I'm gone. And the purpose of that has come down through this thing called the Youth Ambassadors Legacy Fund. And it's an opportunity. I have to say that when COVID struck, we had only just started it. It was only been going on for about 3 to 4 months. And we had already raised $45,000 that will be invested through the community foundations. And I'm quite confident that we are going to then turn around and be able to pull that up over the $100,000 goal once we have programs that are up and running. It's difficult to raise money during COVID, and it's ridiculous to try to do so when no one's going anywhere. But I wanted to let council know that that job is ahead of us, and we will be pursuing it in the near future when we can point to things getting back on their feet. So, your worship, members of council, thank you for your ongoing support through all of our endeavors. If you have any questions, Kieran and I are here to answer them. And if not, once again, thank you for the time and the support. Your worship, back to you.
Thank you, Maury and Kieran. Sorry, thank you so much. What an amazing website. I mean, I did get a sneak peek, I will admit. It's incredibly clean. It's incredibly user-friendly. It projects that kind of positive image of this program and these relationships that we've come to know from the people who've run our International Relations Committee and Maury, most of all, of course, from the beginning. But it really represents the program and the city well. So thank you for the excellent work that's been done here. I think I saw a card with a question, Councillor Thompson and then Councillor Congo. Yeah.
Thanks, Mayor Lehman. More of a comment. I just wanted to thank the presentation and echo the same comments. The website looks great. And Mr. Morrison, I've met you a couple times, and just how passionate you are about the city and what you do, and you're a great ambassador. And one last comment, you sure looked a lot more relaxed in your picture than Mayor Lehman looked in his.
I was thinking exactly that. He's shaved, he's somewhere nice. Yeah. I'm in a tie. I'm looking like I've been up all night.
Yeah,
Maury,
so that's what you got to look forward to.
I got to take life lessons from Maury.
You have no idea how much better I'm going to feel in a few hours, because I'm literally jetting off from this presentation to the airport as I head off to join friends in Mexico. So I'm dressed for Mexico.
Okay, now no sympathy anymore.
Yes, I take back my comments.
Yeah, okay.
No,
thank you very much.
Thanks again.
Thanks. Councillor Kungle.
Thank you, through you, Mayor Lehman, to Kieran and Dave. Thank you for the presentation. Looking forward to helping to push that out through social media where possible. So my questions are really about noting, as I've gone through your website, the relationship to the community fund and foundation, and the reference to having a goal of $100,000. Is there a timeline that's important to achieve that goal? And I'm looking at your first youth exchange for, is it Arras, France in 2023? So I was wondering about if there's some key milestones or timelines this year that you're looking to really try and push promotion and awareness through the website of opportunities to donate and attracting students to apply.
So, I mean, the exact timeline is basically impossible because it's been held by COVID. I mean, like, as I tried to say, it's absurd to raise money for events that aren't occurring. However, if, and with fingers crossed and knocking on wood, if this truly is a corner that's been turned and we are returning to some version of normalcy, it's our hope that the Global Perspectives program will be back to traveling in its 22-23 school year, and that the youth ambassadors will run a program with Murayama, Japan in the summer of 2023. And there's numerous other opportunities. I'll be discussing these opportunities with both Arras, France and Harrogate and the United Kingdom in the coming months. We don't need to be at 100,000 to deal with the start of the next thing. When the $45,000 that are there will keep us in good start for this coming year. I'm talking about building a legacy that will basically, through investments and whatever, continue long after I'm gone from the committee, as opposed to my life, I hope. But the reality is that that I'm quite confident that this will all happen quite quickly. It's important to note that that money, with the exception of 2 very large donations from some families that have been very supportive, the rest of it has come almost exclusively from graduates, like students that have graduated from the program who are now in their 30s or even the beginnings of their 40s, and basically, well, maybe not that long, mid 30s, who have basically recognized the benefit of it. I have not yet started to hit on parents of the past. I haven't yet hit on council, and by the way, you will be hit upon. I haven't yet hit on et cetera, et cetera. I mean, and I haven't even started the corporate request. So I remain fairly confident if this is timed in such a way that we give people a chance to recover from COVID and get their financial footings under them, that we'll be fine moving forward. I feel quite confident of that. I know that's not the timeline answer you wanted, but it's really the best I can give at this point in time.
Follow up, Mayor Lehman?
Yep, go ahead.
Yeah, and fully respect that, Dave. Thank you for that. It was more looking at, should we be watching for something, knowing that we'll have the school break, and I, as well as I'm assuming fellow members of council, engage with schools. Is there anything we can do to kind of draw attention to this for you or to our youth, or are you directly connecting with our school boards?
So the Global Perspectives program, which since my retirement has been run brilliantly by Mr. Jeff Toole and his team at Innisdale, they've already selected the program for next year. So those students are in place. Although it never hurts if you find someone that's keenly interested that for whatever reason missed the deadline. I'm sure taking names to see if there are openings in the future is never something wrong. It's important to note that we have them applying grade 10 so that this is for the second semester of grade 11. That's just how the system works. And the youth ambassadors, there's lots of time. We won't even be recruiting until next year, probably right after Christmas, because in the new year of 2023, because we have a process that basically allows us to get out into the schools and out into various clubs and through social media. And you would absolutely be more than welcome to assist us at that time and put out the word. That's usually for a slightly younger crowd, usually people that are going to be in grade 9 or grade 10 when that occurs, because I've always felt of it as a kind of a feeding ground where they have that experience and then may also choose to do the Global Perspectives. Now, of course, it doesn't always work that way. So we'll be doing that and looking forward to using all of those social media expertise that anyone can share with us, basically starting in 2023.
That's great. Thank you. So as a student that benefited in grade 9 to do an exchange to France, I mean, it is an incredible experience. I do want to just commend you on your approach to making sure this is an accessible one, funding wise, because it does come at a cost to families and billeting and whatnot. So thank you for making that possible and being really dedicated to seeing that this is sustainable and a go forward.
Thank you for your very kind comments.
Thanks, Councillor Kungle. Councillor McCann.
Thank you, Mayor Lehman. And as Mayor Lehman started this meeting saying this will be our last Zoom call, I really felt, heavy-hearted because I'm enjoying these Zoom calls. But where I wouldn't enjoy a Zoom call, Mr. Morrison, is when you bring your team to the chamber and you just see, I don't know, there's maybe 100 kids from different parts of the world and from Barrie, their families, and you really can cut the energy with a knife. It's inspirational, it's electric, and it's just really one of the best nights of council during the year. So, definitely looking forward to seeing you and your team, and Karen, seeing yourself, back at the chamber will be a highlight. I just wanted to say that because I meant that from my heart, and I really think investing in our youth is one of the best investments this city council can, or any city council can actually do. But maybe just one question, unless you want to comment on my comments.
Well, I just want to say thank you. I mean, we too are very excited to get back into the full swing of it at the council meeting, so that, as you said, everyone constantly knows the energy that we bring and that the kids bring to the community.
Yeah, Dave, maybe you misunderstood me. I wasn't excited to get back to council. I was enjoying the Zoom calls. But anyways.
I understood you perfectly.
So Morrison, maybe it's a question. Is there any other cities that you have in the near horizon that are communicating with you that like to be a sister or brother or a relative city to Barrie?
At this point, no. Now, to be fair, there are two other ones that are sitting in abeyance at the moment because we simply had, one was brought by a community group, and that was Puerto Princesa in the Philippines. We would love to set that up, but unfortunately, their political system, if you think ours can sometimes get confusing, they change mayors quite regularly, and we've never been able to get the agreement signed, and we have made it very clear in many different ways that we would be happy to do that whenever they would like to move forward. And we used to have one with China, with Taizhou, China. We haven't actually heard the end of it, but Mayor Lehman went there on an economic business tour, and we've not heard from them since. No, kidding. I'm kidding. At any rate, but in terms of new ones, there has been no inspiration from council for a desire for another one directly. And community groups are possible. There has been off and on discussions about some different places, but there's nothing formalized during the discussion. I mean, we don't see it as within our mandate to go out and find them. We see it as our mandate to bring to fruition that which council wishes to be done. And if council likes to give us some direction, we'd be happy to pursue it.
Yep, I was just more curious on if someone's trying to attract themselves to us. I'll leave by just saying that, when you do some campaigning efforts, I really do believe in this project for many of the same reasons that council members have spoken. Feel free to reach out to me directly because I would like to be a part of some of the fundraising and be a part of maybe getting this moving forward, not as a council member, just as a citizen in Barrie, okay?
Trust me, anybody that wants to help raise money, I'll definitely be in touch with. All right. So thank you very much for your offer. I greatly appreciate it.
Thanks, Councillor McCann. Any other questions for Mr. Morrison? Deputy Mayor Ward.
Thank you. I just wanted to say a few words as the City Council rep on the International Relations Committee. It's a great committee, and it epitomizes exactly what our committees are supposed to be. It's made up of citizens who volunteer their time to make these programs possible. They work very hard. I think it's a really great way to expose not only youth but many of our groups in town. For example, the King Edward Choir I know has gone over to Europe on these exchanges. Just to explain, if people don't know how they work, they're plane-to-plane hosting, which means the people pay their way to these places, and once they're there, they are the guests of every cost is covered by the people they are staying with, and they usually hosted. When I went to Murayama, Japan, I stayed with the deputy mayor there. It was very interesting, not just because he didn't speak any English, but it was a great time. It just gives you a chance, and so there's no other expenses. It's a great way to travel. Both my sons have taken advantage of the program to go to Murayama, and we had to pay for their flights over, but once they were there, they were taken care of. I did want to say that it extends beyond this. It's not just the program, the exchanges. I mean, when I had a chance to go to Harrogate a couple of years ago, and A couple we met over there came and visited us a few months later. They came to Canada and we hosted them here. I mean, it wasn't an official visit. They just came here and they stayed at our house and we had a great time showing them the area. That's the kind of thing that grows out of this. The last thing I wanted to say was, first of all, thanks for the presentation. It was a great presentation. The last thing I wanted to say was that because I've had the good fortune to go to Murriama and Harrogate, the people in those places take these exchanges very seriously. They are very honored that Barrie's a sister or twins, a friendship city of them. They treat you like gold when you're there. They show you everything. They're really proud of their communities and they take you around everywhere. I mean, I think for that reason, it's a really great program. I think sometimes people in Barrie don't realize how much those other places enjoy hosting Barrie residents. And I think I wanted to pay tribute to former Alderman Morrison. He runs the show. I mean, he makes it all possible. I mentioned we have a really good committee, but there's no doubt that it's been so successful for the last 20 some years. It's because we have a great chair. So thank you.
Well, that's very kind of you, Deputy Mayor Ward. I would like to say two more things, Your Worship, if you'll allow me.
Sure.
So first of all, I think it's important, and I know I say this all the time, but I think it's important that you all understand that we're unique. Nobody else is doing this within Canada, like to this extent. There are other communities that have 6, 8 sister cities, but it's like pass a motion and put up a sign. I mean, that's all they do. And we won't allow that to occur. I mean, if we're going to have a sister city, we're going to do something with them or we're not going to be sister cities for long. And so that process, I think, is incredibly important. And I know you've all said nice things and that's great, but I think you should all be very proud of what this committee has developed over the years. And the final part of that is, I really very much appreciate the compliments, but I'd like to pay tribute to the person that predated me in the chair. Right. It's important to recognize that not everyone that starts things continue to be with us, either on the committee or in life itself. Former Alderman Rob Warman, in his 90s, was taken from us a short time ago, and people need to understand that I'm of the opinion that without him and some of the people around him that assisted, none of this would have happened. This happened before my time, and he was still an active member of the IRC, literally, as he was passing away. So we've had great good fortune in the leadership from the community, and none of this would have been possible without him. And of course, to be fair, former Mayor Janice Laking, who was in the chair at the start of all of this. So thank you once again to everybody. Once again, if there's any other questions or any other volunteers, especially volunteers to raise money, because that's awesome, please reach out. I'll be happy to get back to you as soon as I return from Mexico.
All right. Thanks, Maury. And just in closing, and actually to Councillor McCann's point, I mean, I think one of the things I really appreciate about working with IRC over the years is when Honorary Colonel Massey and I had put that relationship together with Ross, IRC jumped on board and said, you know, this is something that we can offer as a new relationship, a new cultural exchange, and a new opportunity for our young people to get to know Canada's military history, and specifically this town near Vimy Ridge in France. And you know, as these relationships, and then Harrogate, of course, was mentioned as well. Those are new, and IRC again embraced this and said, let's make this work and create opportunities for our young people, and in fact for our citizens, because we've had Harrogate's choir come over and other exchanges in the past few years. But most of all, this is about giving Barrie kids an opportunity to do something that kids nowhere else can do, and that happens because of the work of you and your committee. We'll give the last word to Kieran. Go ahead.
Yeah, sorry, I don't have one of the signs, but I would just like to say thank you guys so much for supporting these programs. Like as part of like an alumni, I want to call it, of Global Perspectives. It was just such an incredible opportunity and experience. Like there's nothing like it. And the hardest part that I have to face is like once I pass a certain age, there's no doing that again. So it's a once in a lifetime opportunity. And I would just like to thank you for all of your support in that program. Yeah.
Thanks for
thank
that,
you.
Kieran. All right. Thank you both for being here tonight. Safe trip, Maury. And with that, we'll conclude the presentation. Thanks for being here.
Thank you once again, everyone. Good night.
And our second presentation tonight is by Royal Victoria Hospital. So Regional Health Center, sorry, I still think of RVH as RV Hospital. And of course it is now a regional health center and will become even more of one. And I know that's when you are here to talk to us about. Tonight I'll call on Charlotte Wallace, the chair of the board at RVH, and Janice Scott, president and CEO, to provide their presentation, which is concerning an update on RVH's capital plans for growth. With that, I will turn it over to you, Charlotte. Welcome.
Great. Good evening, Your Worship and members of Council. My name is Charlotte Wallace, and I'm the chair of the Royal Victoria Regional Health Centre Board of Directors. This evening, I'm joined by Janice Scott, RVH President and CEO, and we're very pleased to have the opportunity to come before Council and members of the community who are joining virtually tonight. The last time we addressed Council was 2 years ago, just before the global pandemic was declared. What a difference 2 years makes. Back in early 2020, we could never have imagined the severity, length, or impact of the pandemic. We have all been tested, but none more than healthcare workers. For Team RVH, this has been an incredibly grueling, relentless 2 years. Our staff and physicians are utterly exhausted, physically and mentally. Yet every day, they show up and demonstrate a level of courage, compassion, and pure grit that is truly inspiring. As chair of the board of directors, I cannot tell you how proud I am of this team that has cared for our community in its time of greatest need. Whether it's providing life-saving critical care to the region and beyond, opening 140 additional beds, including a field hospital, operating a busy testing facility, administering hundreds of thousands of vaccine doses, hiring more than 300 additional healthcare workers who work long hours in hot PPE under extremely challenging circumstances. Throughout every difficult day of this pandemic, RVH has been there for the residents of Barrie. Of course, RVH has always been there for this community. In fact, this year, RVH celebrates its 125th anniversary. It's a rich story. Since 1897, when the first Royal Vic opened, through to relocation and renovations on Ross Street and construction of the current Georgian Drive facility opening in 1997, which the city contributed more than $24 million to, RVH and the city of Barrie have always worked shoulder to shoulder to ensure the residents of the city have access to world-class care as close to home as possible. In 2005, Council pledged $52.5 million to RVH's Phase 1 expansion project. A month later, the Ministry of Health approved the expansion, which opened in 2012. That expansion would not have happened without your vision and leadership. Although not a funder of our most recent Hearts and Mind campaign, which expanded regional services, including child and youth mental health and advanced cardiac care, the city was extremely supportive. 3 years ago, RVH launched its planning exercise for the next ambitious expansion. And we're so grateful to Mayor Lehman for his guidance as a member of our Board of Directors Capital Planning Committee. He also sits on our foundation board. Your insight and advice has always been invaluable to us as we boldly plan for the future. And now, to outline our vision for the future, I'll turn it over to Janice Scott, RVH's President and CEO. Janice.
Thanks very much, Charlotte, and good evening, Your Worship and members of Council. As we often say, RVH's story is Barrie's story, a story of never-ending growth, progress, and innovation. RVH and the City of Barrie have written the chapters of that story together, and I know our partnership will continue into the future. RVH's expansion will be the largest infrastructure project in our city's history by far. So I'd like to begin our update tonight with a bit of refresher on the plan. It is a one system, two site model, a model where both facilities located north and south work together to provide integrated care. Step one in our plan was the opening of the outpatient clinics at the Rizzardo Health and Wellness Center, serving South Barrie and Innisfil. The next 3 steps will happen over the next decade. This includes significant redevelopment and expansion of our current facility or the North Campus. At the same time, construction will begin on the South Campus. This represents our Stage 1 submission, which will be submitted to the province later this month. The next stage of the graduated model will add some inpatient beds at the South Campus, all with an eye to developing a full-service hospital within 20 years at the South Campus. Let's take a deeper dive into our plans beginning on Georgian Drive. You will remember that this facility doubled in size in 2012. We added advanced technology, more beds, and new regional services, including cancer, cardiac, child youth mental health, renal. True to the build it and they will come strategy, since the expansion opened, we have logged 2 million visits from Barrie residents alone. That includes 166,000 unique patients from Barrie, people who were able to get specialized care right here in their home community. Since 2012, we've increased our staff by 60%. We also welcomed 150 additional physicians, many of them specialists drawn to our regional programs. The North Campus is where the bulk of the expansion will occur over the next decade. Our plan sees the current facility doubling in size again, enabling this facility to focus on more acute, complex services and procedures. The North Campus expansion will start with maximizing the existing building, including fitting out the empty shelled units that were built as part of the 2012 expansion. This will allow us to expand specialized clinical services, such as critical care. In fact, we've already submitted to government a plan to add a second 15-bed critical care unit. In 20 years, RVH will have 46 critical care beds. We'll also add 2 new radiation suites in our cancer center. Many clinics will expand, such as the dialysis clinic, and there'll also be significant expansions to mental health, maternal child, and of course, the neonatal intensive care for our premature newborns, which is currently significantly undersized. We'll also continue to expand and add to advanced technology in our imaging department, including a 3rd MRI. Rotary Place, the non-clinical building, which includes a lodge for cancer patients, will expand too, freeing up space in the main hospital for patient care. A new 800,000 square foot, 9-story inpatient tower will house additional beds, and we will create a new surgical area that is double the current size to allow for best practices and state-of-the-art equipment. We will also add 5 new operating rooms. We'll also expand space, allowing for more day procedures. RVH's busy emergency department will grow with 15 additional treatment spaces. An expanded Center for Education Research will enable RVH to accelerate its education mandate and will include a teaching auditorium. In total, this project will bring the number of beds at the North Campus to more than 600. The North Campus will be transformed into a larger regional center, expanding almost every service we provide. And again, this pre-tower and tower phase will happen within 10 years from approval. The South Campus will also play an important role in healthcare for Barrie residents. After a 3-year comprehensive search, last fall, we announced the location of the future South Campus in Innisfil. As you are all aware, RVH's South Campus will be located on this 83-acre site at the southwest corner of Yonge Street and Innisfil Beach Road, less than 4 kilometers south of Barrie. At the ceremony, Mayor Lehman noted the many townhouses, homes, and condo buildings under construction that he passed on his way to the South Campus location. And he really put that short drive into perspective when he said, and I quote, "When you need a test or your kid breaks a bone, it doesn't matter which side of a municipal boundary you live on. What you want is access to care right away, and that's what the South Campus will allow for Barrie residents in the future." End of quote. This image will not be the final design of the facility, but it does give you a sense of how the South Campus will expand over 20 years. As noted, the first phase, completed in 10 years, will be a health hub focused on outpatient clinics, day procedures, as well as an urgent care center. Then in 15 years, we'll add inpatient beds that aren't dependent on an emergency department, such as seniors care or rehabilitation. It's very important to note the North and the South Campus are completely interdependent. One can't proceed without the other. Services within the 2-campus model are integrated, not duplicated. For example, while Barrie residents will continue to receive advanced cardiac care at the North Campus, their diagnostics and follow-up could occur at the South Campus. Within 20 years, the South Campus will evolve to be a full-service acute care hospital with a 24/7 emergency department, birthing units, and operating rooms. So to give you some perspective, the size of the South Campus at completion will be almost the size of RVH today. In short, Barrie residents will be served by both sites. So what does RVH's bed capacity look like over the next 2 decades? Remember, the clock doesn't start ticking until the plan is approved by the Ministry of Health. RVH's current capacity for permanent beds is 390. So let's assume we get the green light this year. I like that assumption. In 5 years, the pre-tower phase will add more than 90 beds to the North Campus. In 10 years, the North Campus will have expanded to more than 600 beds. And in 20 years, RVH will have more than 900 beds between the 2 sites. The hospital system will see more than 1 million patient visits each year. And we can't build those beds soon enough. Explosive population growth has meant RVH faces a critical bed shortage. Prior to the pandemic, occupancy rates at the North Campus were consistently over 115%. The year before the pandemic, over 3,000 patients were cared for in hallways and makeshift care spaces with no windows or private washrooms. One of the harshest lessons of the pandemic is that we cannot go back to hallway medicine. Simply put, it just isn't safe. We also need to ensure we are never again short of critical care beds. The site is large enough so RVH can continue to evolve and expand beyond our 20-year plan. There's also significant space to include associated services, such as doctors' offices, clinics, an academic partnership with a university or college, perhaps an innovation center, igniting additional research in our region. The opportunities for this site and our community are very, very exciting. Barrie is so fortunate to have Lake Simcoe as an incredible natural resource, and its importance can't be overstated as a source of water, food, and recreation. Environmental protection and sustainability are important to RVH and the site's natural elements like the 9-acre woodlot, and it will be protected and integrated into the site and facility design. In fact, the woodlot, along with a 30-meter buffer around it, will be designated as environmental protection zone. Environmental sustainability and green materials will be a key priority as we design and construct the facility. And we have consulted with environmental groups, and we will continue to work closely with the Lake Simcoe Regional Conservation Authority to ensure the South Campus plan is aligned with Lake Simcoe's protection plan. Broad, genuine community consultation was foundational to RVH's planning exercise, and since 2018, we have logged an unprecedented 63,500 engagement interactions. That's an incredible level of consultation. Using a wide variety of engagement tools, we consulted with diverse and vulnerable populations, Indigenous and Francophone partners, patients, families, staff, physicians, volunteers, and donors. RVH's innovative street team even spoke with residents at the Barrie Farmers Market and at Centennial Beach. Community feedback informed all aspects of our North and South Campus plan. Again, simply put, the community spoke and RVH listened. Building on previous consultations, we will also continue to work closely with our Indigenous partners, co-designing many elements of our plan. The Barrie Area Native Advisory Circle is an invaluable guide and has supported RVH to introduce a hospital-wide smudging policy, cultural safety training for staff and physicians, self-identification protocols, and a dedicated Indigenous health team. We'll continue to consult with our Indigenous partners, not just as we expand in the future, but on what we can do today to improve our spaces, practices, and services. Some of you may ask, why now? Why the urgency to expand? The biggest driving force is population growth, and I know that's the impetus behind much of Council's decision-making too. The population of South Simcoe County will continue to explode over the next 2 decades. In fact, as we all know, it will double. Conservatively, over the next 30 years, more than 200,000 new residents will move to South Simcoe, and most of that growth will be in Barrie. Driven by the exodus from large cities during the pandemic and guided by the province's Places to Grow plan, which designates Barrie as a growth center, Barrie's new official plan forecasts a population of almost 300,000 by 2051, more than double the current population. And we know healthcare, like social services, education, and transportation, is a vital underpinning to a healthy community. And access to high quality healthcare is a key consideration for residents and businesses thinking of relocating to a community. RVH gives current and future residents of this medium-sized city peace of mind, knowing almost all their healthcare needs, including very specialized advanced care, can be met close to home. Of course, with housing starts having doubled in Barrie this past year and more development on the way, RVH is already feeling the pressure from increasing healthcare demands. With strategic growth planned for the Little Lake area, high density in the city's core, and housing developments in the annex lands, this city will need the expanded capacity and services provided by an integrated North and South campus. RVH expansion plan will strengthen Barrie as a complete community where residents can live and work while knowing they and their families have access to world-class care. RVH is already a significant economic engine for the city of Barrie as the city's largest single-site employer with almost 3,500 employees and nearly 500 physicians. One of the city's goals is to see Barrie move away from being a bedroom community, so we don't have more than 20,000 people commuting to work every day. Well, once our expansion is complete, RVH will more than double its workforce with 5,000 additional employees. Those are stable, well-paying jobs, giving our young people so many opportunities to stay, grow, and learn. 93% of RVH's current employees and physicians live in Simcoe County, which means a lot of their spending stays in the local economy, on houses, at the grocery stores, restaurants, and other businesses. Using a commonly used wage multiplier, RVH's current payroll translates to a direct annual spin-off impact of $300 million to the local community. In a decade, with the North Campus expansion complete and the South Campus Health Hub open, the spin-off impact will be $720 million annually. In 20 years, the secondary economic impact to Barrie and area will be a staggering $940 million. Hospitals also drive business around them. If you have any doubt, look at Quarry Ridge, look at Little Lake, look at the innovation of companies building near the hospital. That's the catalyst effect of RVH. And that ongoing economic boost, it doesn't factor in the construction period. The cost of RVH's capital project at the 10-year mark is estimated to be roughly $3 billion. And although it's too early in the planning to estimate the construction impact on our local economy, we know RVH's 2012 expansion required a staggering 1.7 million person hours of work. And this project is 6 times larger. 80% of the tradespeople were used on our previous project lived locally, as were many of the suppliers. Again, simply put, having a growing hospital in your community is also very good for business. The timelines to build a hospital are long and complex. And again, the 10-year clock doesn't start ticking until we secure approval. We've already submitted the pre-capital submission to the province. Our plan has been endorsed by Ontario Health's Central Region, and we will submit stage 1 of our plan at the end of this month. Again, our goal, guided by ongoing community consultation and the support of our partner municipalities, is to complete the ambitious expansion of the current North Campus and open phase 1 of the South Campus in 10 years. But we also need to look beyond our community's acute healthcare needs. We know almost half of our region's residents have a chronic condition like diabetes, heart disease, or respiratory illness. RVH is pleased to be a partner in the Barrie Health Accord, which focuses upstream on the root cause of those health issues, things like affordable housing, employment, and access to treatment. As RVH expands, we look forward to working with our partners, including the City of Barrie, to develop strategies that address inequities as a way to prevent health problems and create a healthier Barrie. So in closing, again, I'd like to thank Mayor Lehman and councillors for your ongoing support and leadership. We've spoken with all of you over the last few months, and to a person, you have provided invaluable advice, counsel, and encouragement. RVH is so excited about the future and its possibilities, and I know you are too. We're excited about what it'll mean for our city, and especially what it'll mean for your constituents. And now Charlotte and I would be pleased to answer any questions you may have. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Janice and Charlotte, as we sort of follow along through a lot of information there, but a look to the future for sure. Questions for Ms. Scott and Ms. Wallace? Councillor Kungl, go ahead.
Thank you. Through you, Mayor Lehman, to CEO Scott and Board Chair Wallace. Thank you for the presentation. I have some questions that are in broader scopes, and knowing that our Ontario health system, as we're seeing, is still going through that transformation through LINS to Ontario Health, and some Ontario Health teams are still taking off. I'm thinking a bit about all those other pieces that really support a hospital to be successful around patient flow. Can you speak at all, knowing about the growth projections you've spoken to, around the increased number of patients when we look at that future forecasting, and the growth of the hospital, how dependent that also is around, while we are investing in beds and want to see more critical care beds, access to those beds is dependent to some degree on good flow of patients out of hospital, either into long-term care home beds, back to home with other supports. Is there anything that we should appreciate tied to this capital project that's quite significant, where the hospital is also looking at the need to advocate for so many long-term care home beds, all those additional supports that will support the broader community and the operations of the hospital to be able to intake and outflow patients effectively?
May I go
Scott.
ahead?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, thanks very much, Councillor Kungl, for the question. Certainly, now that the province of Ontario is organized under Ontario Health and includes many, many agencies that have been more independent, there really is a sense that the entire system is working together. And in that, of course, is also the important, you mentioned long-term care, but also the importance of the community-based services and community health care and hospital care in the home. So I'm pleased to say that we are certainly very involved in a number of areas. For example, the Barrie Area Ontario Health Team has been finalized and funding has been approved, and we're moving forward in some of those key strategies. And there are many of those groups you mentioned who are around that table. And I think that truly is a really important part of the future. In addition to that, of course, our ties and communication with long-term care homes and retirement homes have never been stronger than they needed to be during this pandemic. And through our Infection Prevention and Control Hub, we spent an enormous number of hours assisting our long-term care partners in terms of their infection prevention and control practices, staff education, et cetera. So we're very aware, particularly with our long alternate level of care numbers, that these areas have to grow as well. So all that to say is, we advocate for them as well. We'd like to see the entire system grow, because if we're just growing the acute side, then obviously that's not going to be sufficient, I think is your point. But I believe there's better synergy. And one of the benefits of the pandemic, better synergy around Ontario Health itself. And of course, the province does have plans to increase long-term care beds to ensure that, in fact, we can keep pace with not only the population growth, but the bulging of the baby boomers and aging, which of course is going to have a huge impact on all of our services.
Thank you, CEO Scott. If I may, another follow-up question. It was great to get the refresher too on the relationship of the North and South campus. And you talk about access to treatment will be important, and that those two sites will work together. Is there anything that you can share at this time about when that conversation around transportation takes place? And if there are any innovative ideas around how do we invite individuals in a cost-effective manner to make sure that they can access transit between those sites? What's the dependency on municipalities from a transportation infrastructure impact that we might want to forecast? Knowing this is further out, I mean, where do those conversations happen, and what should we as council appreciate around access to care that comes with such a huge development?
Thank you. Mayor Lehman. Okay. Thanks for the question. So clearly the actual transportation between facilities for patients is something we bring municipalities together, the town of Innisfil and the city of Barrie, to have that conversation, because the two campuses are in different municipalities. But as Mayor Lehman has said, we're not going to let that municipal boundary impact, but obviously we can play a facilitating role in bringing people together. There may be a more direct role we play if staff are going between the two sites, that we might have a more direct transportation responsibility. We've also, of course, worked really closely with private transportation services, that I think we would continue to do that to make sure we're not relying on the ambulance factors itself, but actually working with private companies as well. But we've had earlier conversations just about transportation, parking, those elements as well. And we're going to need to be innovative into the next 10 years. We can't be thinking of everyone having their own automobile and making that work in this new system. So those conversations are well underway. Our planning is still at a fairly high level, but working with both municipalities and of course bringing patients to the table through our Patient and Family Advisory Council will be so important to understand the impact that those changes will have for people. The good news is, if you're in the area of South Simcoe, South Barrie, and into Innisfil, it's going to be much closer for you to receive a lion's share of your care. And of course, if you're coming up into the North Campus as well, it's still much closer to get those specialized services in Barrie than it is to have to transfer or transport yourself to Toronto, for example, for that would have happened if it had been 10 years earlier. So it is all part of a plan. Tonight, I'd say we're still in those infancy stages, but we do know it's very important.
Okay, thank you. Final follow-up question, if I may.
Yep.
And I wasn't, of course, around that council table when you showed the photos of the historical ask to council. So whether it's to you, Janice, Charlotte, or Mayor Lehman, a member of staff, for those watching tonight and to council, where does the capital ask in the future that we're expecting be specific to the actual structure of the building versus dollars? I'm assuming that would need to come through transportation or maybe provincially around infrastructure that supports, getting to and from this multi-site. So is there another ask that happens or another budget impact that's not just included in the original ask or the next future ask to council?
Ms. Scott?
Certainly. So tonight's presentation is an update for council as we're heading into the next stage being submitted to the Ministry of Health this month. So I think the question is, is there, in addition to the support we will seek for the capital project itself, is there another request based on the fact there are two sites and transportation in between? Is that the question?
I believe so, yes. I have this assumption that there are other infrastructure dollars tied to transit and roads that I'm not aware. Is that just something that's an artifact that, is an impact to municipalities when we see large scale development? Or, will the city of Barrie be asked to support this capital development in multiple ways outside of just the actual on-site build?
So from RVH's perspective, we would be making a future request of council, this City of Barrie Council, to support the actual build of the project, period. And also knowing that, as it was said, the condos, the houses, et cetera, they're developing all the way down into the town of Innisfil. I'm sure that the city has a plan to ensure that its infrastructure is sufficient for just transportation generally. But as you said, it's also the public are watching tonight. I just want to make sure, for example, I'll give a more specific example because I don't want patients to think they're going between two facilities in one day. That's not the intention. So I'll give a cataract surgery as an example. That's an outpatient procedure. And there makes a lot of sense to have a single cataract eye center at the South Campus. So if you're needing cataract surgery, the one place you'd go, just once, would be to the South Campus for a day procedure, as an example. If, however, you're having a complex cancer surgery that requires an inpatient stay, again, you wouldn't be going between the two campuses. You would come to the North Campus on Georgian Drive, and you would have your cancer surgery and an inpatient stay. Maybe you'd require an intensive care stay, for example. So that's the type of situation that will happen. the benefit is if you live in areas where you think you could do some diagnostic work on your heart, for example, that would be a scheduled procedure. And then if there was a sense that there was going to need to be an angiogram of your heart or eventually angioplasty, that would be a booked procedure that would come up to the North Campus. So it isn't as if there's a, when we say it integrated, it's patient-focused integrated, meaning it works for patients better than that perhaps if we had gone forward to government wanting to actually duplicate both sites, put like radiation bunkers in the South Campus. That doesn't make sense at all. So it's, but I don't want to think or leave council with the impression or the community that there's going to be frequent trips between two places because of the way we've designed it. It's quite the opposite, actually.
That's great. Thank you, Janice.
Thank you.
Thanks, Ms. Scott. Councillor Riepma.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have two questions. And first of all, RVH is great, and I'm very happy to have RVH in Ward 1. And you've spoken about how much of an impact it has on the city finances and the economy of the city, and I really appreciate that. What I take it from your presentation is that growth is really responsible for what we are doing here, what you're doing. And so if the population in this area doubles, it makes sense that it has to, the size of the hospital has to double. So my first question is, have you thought about that some of the hospital funding, which is growth related, should come from development charges? And my second question is kind of related to that. When I was born, I know my mother spent a week in the hospital. When my children were born, I think we spent an hour or two. So medicine has changed dramatically over those years. And now we're looking for a new facility that is, 20, 30 years out. And I wanted to know how you felt about, or could you talk about the changes that you anticipate in medicine? Because if the changes are as significant as what we've seen in birth, then there's going to be a lot of other changes too. So two questions, and feel free to answer them in whichever order you think you like.
Go ahead, Ms. Scott.
Thanks very much. I want to begin by just talking about that population growth, and that really we're responding to the population growth, which has always been our story for 125 years, to make sure we have the hospital size that we need. And as we've mentioned today, we're already undersized just based on the growth to date. But what's really important is we've spent the last decade bringing the specialized services to Barrie, cancer, cardiac. Those are services that weren't available before. Now what we are talking about is actually having to increase the whole size of each of those programs and others to make sure we keep up with population growth. I believe we're going to have discussions into the future on how the city's contribution would be paid for. And I think I'd leave that to the expertise of the mayor and the council and senior staff to determine that. And I don't think that's a question that I should answer, but certainly not only would the current residents, but all future residents benefit greatly by ensuring that we have sufficient size and capacity within our hospital to make sure that in fact, we can provide the care when they need it. Those moments matter only when you really need that health care. And so we want to make sure we're here for everyone today and into the future. With respect to how we looked at, you're quite right. I think birthing is a really great example, because I was in the hospital a lot longer when my children were born than people are today. But we have actually taken 3 years of intensive planning to come up with the model. And the whole concept was to talk about the hospital of the future. It isn't the hospital of today, and it certainly is not the hospital of the past. So when we're looking at these projections, they really are based on the deep research that was done by hundreds of people involved in developing this plan, our current leaders, our current physician leaders, but also going out to across Canada, into the States, looking at those hospitals of the future to make sure that what we are requiring and requesting is as clear as can be. Technology is changing rapidly. There's so many other areas. So we did not take the past and just make it look like this for the next 20 years. we know that would be very short-sighted. So that's why we took 3 years to come up with a plan. The board approved the plan 2 years ago, and then we submitted it to government. So it's been quite a long trajectory, but I can assure you with confidence that in the areas that should be provided in the community, we would like to see more prevention, to see people not having to come to hospital for chronic diseases. But at the end of the day, the beds we require and where we're heading with these services are absolutely essential. I want to give you a neonatal intensive care unit. Today, with a premature baby, and their crib, bassinet, and all the equipment around them, and their parents, we have 35 square feet. That's not even the size of a closet, right? So we know that it's grossly undersized, doesn't provide for privacy, even just from all the other perspectives we've looked at. We have right-sized that for the future, not only each cubicle area, but also, of course, knowing the population growth where we're going and the number of babies that we're going to welcome into our community at RVH. So that's just an example of how we are really making some changes, but really with our eye to the future, what we're expecting hospitals to look like.
Thanks for both those answers, Scott. Other questions for the presenters from RVH? Okay, seeing none. Just briefly by way of a comment as a member of the Capital Planning Committee, I do want to emphasize that last point about looking forward. Not only is the timeline, and it's notable in your slides tonight, Janice, that we're talking about 2051 and building to meet the healthcare needs of a community for decades. And so this is obviously, it's an enormous project on many levels, square feet, beds, dollars, and years. But it is to meet the needs of a community that is going to more than double in population in that time frame. And I think that point you made about the hospital of the future was such a key piece because, you know, there was a real discussion I can share with you, members of council, around that capital planning committee table and the architects and the service experts and the RVH team, as well as all the community reps, that we did not want to build something where the future model of care is going to be dispersed or technological because it's home-based. And we did want to build for the care, you know, to create those kinds of options. But the reality is so much of care continues to need to be provided in a hospital setting. And I think Councillor Congo made an excellent point with her initial comment around ALC and the need for more capacity, for example, in long-term care, which then takes pressure off of our hospitals and of course, creates an environment designed for the needs of seniors in long-term care. And so it's all part of a much bigger picture, of course. But I think I did want to assure you, and I think it did come through in the presentation, but just reinforce that message. Number one, that we're designing for years of growth, not 5 years of growth and we're back at it, not 10 years of growth and we're back at it, but 20 and 30 years. And secondly, that there really was an eye to the technology and the changes in care that are known and expected as well in the coming years. And it makes it all very exciting. And maybe I'll just add one other quick note, because I did have the privilege of attending the ceremony to announce the South location. That was at a time during COVID when numbers were a little limited and we were outside in a tent, but it was a decent day. And most importantly, I think there was the opportunity there to recognize, and I know, Janice, you referenced it, but that location is just minutes from so much of the development that we around this table have been approving over the last couple of years. Every planning committee meeting that we do a 900 and something Mapleview or a something Lockhart or a something Yonge Street South, we're approving these subdivisions, which over the course of the 20, 30 years will be a big part of that growth that is going to be served by a two-campus model. And so it is difficult sometimes, you know, to imagine, you know, it's not difficult to imagine across the municipal boundary, but it can be difficult to imagine a whole new campus in addition to the scale of expansion that's being discussed here. But that's what makes a regional health center and the huge next step that this capital plan represents for our community in terms of the growing role of RVH. And I would be remiss if I didn't say in closing, Janice and Charlotte, that you know, so many people's jobs were that much more difficult during the pandemic, but for nurses, particularly physicians, all of the frontline workers, and in fact, the support staff and yourselves as leadership at RVH, I know there were incredibly stressful and difficult weeks when you were surrounded by the worst realities of COVID and trying to adapt and manage amid that situation. So thank you for all you've done over the last 2 years. I did not want to miss the opportunity to say that on the day in which we lifted our state of emergency. And while I know there is still very real pressure at RVH, I think we're all hopeful looking forward that the worst of that pressure is behind us. So thank you for what you've done. Thanks for being here tonight. And if there are no further questions from members of council, I'll declare the presentation concluded. And thanks for being here.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Members of council, brings us to inquiries of staff. Deputy Mayor Ward, do you have inquiries of staff?
Have none.
Councillor Kung.
I do have one. It's coming on the heels of the presentation, but because it wasn't specific to what was provided, it's a broader conversation for staff. So I'll direct it to CEO Prowse or Ms. McAlpine, I believe, who's here this evening. Thank you.
Yep.
It has to do with the broader lens of, while the hospital, we know there'll be an ask in the future, there is an out-year plan that's robust and extensive. Where do we, as a municipality, take a lens, and maybe it's through the next term's strategic directions, but where do we kind of say, health human resources is going to be an issue, what's our role to play? We, I believe, spend $60,000 in our annual budget to support the physician recruitment task force. What are the impacts such a development will have, and does this mean we need to take on an advocacy role with the provincial government around when the widening of the 400 happens? And so I'm looking at the broader impact of not just the hospital, but collectively around the stages of development and the phase of impact as certain sites grow. Where do we kind of sit and look about all the different departments where that has an impact, and then need to plan out from our own capital budget how to support that?
Ms. McAlpine.
Mayor Lehman, through you to Councillor Kungle. So one of the things that staff will be doing is continuing to work with our partners at RVH to determine infrastructure needs for the facilities within the city boundaries. And that's informed by discussions with them regarding their expectations of traffic flow and items like that. That will be used to inform the city's capital plan on a long-term basis. In terms of physician recruitment, that really will be informed again by RVH in terms of whether or not there are additional asks of the municipality related to that. Our economic and creative development team have been strong supporters of RVH and their recruitment activities. Certainly, new facilities are always attractive, often to new physicians. So sometimes they support themselves in terms of attracting new physicians and all of the important staff who would operate at RVH. But economic and creative development have regular conversations with our partners at RVH on their needs from a labor supply perspective, and those kinds of things we would bring forward as staff if we felt that there were asks that required additional resources, either financial or staff-wise.
Thank you. And then just brief follow-up. Would housing be something that gets added into that more formally around how is housing appreciated when we talk not just about, you know, the scaling up of the number of from an economic driver jobs created, but I'm already seeing conversations in the health system around if they're living out of region and commuting in, or we're not looking desirable because we actually don't have a place to house all of this new type of job creation. So where does housing tie into such a huge change in this type of forecasting?
Ms. McAlpine, might be a question for Ms. Banfield. Yeah, Ms.
Thank you.
Banfield, go ahead.
Through you, Mayor Lehman, to Councillor Kungle, you know, housing is certainly one aspect of a complete community, and so you know, ultimately, everything that that certainly we do in development services really is trying to factor in all the needs of a community, which include obviously housing. Obviously, we've just passed the new official plan that, you know, gives some attention certainly to this area out by the college and the hospital to kind of have some of that flexibility. You know, fundamentally, we actually don't have a concern in the city of getting housing, to be honest. It's more about making it accessible, affordable, providing housing options for people, and that, you know, providing those options are what going to make it more available for people. So I hope that answers your question, but I mean, as I said, the housing really is one part of it, and as I said, it actually isn't the struggle to get housing in the municipality. It's to get that range of housing and across the municipality that's going to make it, and in places that they can people can use transit and can shop. You know, again, it does tie into that complete communities, and it's something that that staff certainly work on for anything that before we bring it back to council.
Okay, thank you. Thanks to you both for answering those kind of broad questions, but I appreciate it.
Thanks, Councillor Kungle. Inquiries of staff? Other inquiries of staff? Okay, seeing none. Announcements, Deputy Mayor Ward.
I have none.
Members of council, any announcements? Councillor Natalie Harris.
Very quickly, I just was notified that there may be, just like, I guess I'm not even going to get into the details, just a reminder for people to know that they can go and get naloxone kits from 88 Malcaster and from most pharmacies. There are some very potent new street drugs right now that are causing some concerns. And I've just been updated on that. So please remember to go to the pharmacy, pick one up. They're very simple to use, and the pharmacist can show you how to use them, as well as 88 Malcaster. Thanks.
Thanks, Councillor Harris. Councillor Kungle.
Thank you. I'll be brief. I have a couple of ward-specific announcements. So Walk With Me Wednesdays is still on. Reach out or just find me at the mall in Ward 3 at anywhere between 7 a.m. and 8:30 a.m. And I did want to also reach out and say thank you to Mason, who's a grade 5 student in Ward 3, who wrote to me as his counselor around what he'd like to see around changes in the green space behind a school. So we had great conversation on Saturday with his family, but I did want to take that opportunity to say thank you, Mason, and watch for the Kungle Cares Facebook page. We're going to launch his ideas there. We'd love to get more feedback about how to activate that space for youth, and would love to get lots of your feedback and ways in which we can connect about improvements. My final announcement is because tomorrow is International Women's Day. And I know, I'm sure there'll be announcements there, but I did want to say thank you to the Barrie Women and Children Shelter, who every year engages and is supported by an exceptional number of sponsors to bring an empowerment luncheon to members of the public and to individuals to have conversations around educating and informing and being empowered. And this year's theme is breaking the bias. And I in particular wanted to shout out to our Junior Sharks hockey team. So those ladies have had an exceptional season. Their final home game is in Ward 3 at the East Bayfield Community Center tomorrow night at 8 o'clock. I am hoping you will join me. I don't usually get a little Sharks hat. So I do want to formally recognize 5 ladies on the team that are graduating and have represented the city of Barrie exceptionally well through sport and how you lead on and off the ice. So if I may, here are the 5 ladies that I hope you can support in some way on social media or at the game tomorrow. Callie Hogarth, number 41. Macy Peache, number 18. Georgia Babcock, number 94. Sierra Moreau, number 11. Carson, Lou, I'm hoping I pronounced that right, number 55, and Macy Peach, number 18. I hope I haven't missed anyone, but please check out the Junior Barrie Sharks Facebook page. They were highlighted as graduating leaders on the team. Their season does end. The last home game, at least, is Tuesday. So please cheer however you can. But ladies, thank you for basically breaking the bias and showing up in sport and in your life in ways in which that kind of recreate what it's like to lead through the city and in your roles. So thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Kungl. And that is the first time in my 16 years somebody's worn a Sharks hat. But I want to start singing Baby Shark. But you know, if I do that, you'll never stop. Nobody will ever stop. Thank you so much for the announcement and timely as well with the Shark season winding down. They do our city incredibly proud. They represent us so well. I have Councillor Morales.
Thanks, Mayor Lehman. And talking about approving subdivisions earlier in the night tonight, tomorrow at Planning Committee, there is a 613 unit potential subdivision in Ward 9 for the planning meeting. So anybody in the entire city or Ward 9 interested on that, staff report is online, publicly available, and planning meeting will be meeting tomorrow to talk about that Lockhart property.
Yep, thanks very much, Councillor Morales. Councillor Natalie Harris, another one.
My apologies. I've already posted it online, but there is also a, in the planning committee, we have the public meeting for 157 Arter Road as well. So you can go to barrie.ca for more info. You're on mute again.
Sorry, apologies for that. Just getting my own notes here. Any further announcements, members of council? Nope. Okay. Of course, first and foremost, tomorrow we are proclaiming May 8th as International Women's Day in the city of Barrie. We will be raising the flag tomorrow morning as well. City of Barrie's waste collection calendar is, we're looking for some feedback on this. Please visit barrie.ca/calendar to provide your feedback. That'll inform future decisions about that publication. I know it is hanging on many fridges around the city, but we're always looking for feedback on that. When you change your clocks forward an hour on March 13th, please remember also to install new batteries in your smoke and carbon monoxide alarms. It is already that time. To learn more about fire safety equipment, it's barrie.ca/fire safety equipment. The overnight parking restrictions are still in effect until the end of March. We do get to this time of year when people start to think they go with the snow. Certainly not today, but they do last until the end of March, and that is no parking overnight from 12 till 7, of course. We are hiring for summer camps. City of Barrie is looking for camp leaders, lifeguards, camp counselors, and more. Applicants must be currently enrolled in or student at a secondary school, college, or university. Please check out the website if you're interested in a summer job with the city and our camps programs. The bylaws, Deputy Mayor Ward, go ahead.
Moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Thompson, that leave be granted to introduce the following bills, and these bills be read a first, second, and third time this day and finally passed. Bills 11, 12, 13, 14, and 16.
It's moved by Deputy Mayor Ward, seconded by Councillor Thompson, that leave be granted to introduce the following bills, and these bills be read a first, second, and third time this day and finally passed. Bills 11, 12, 13, 14, and 16. Comments or questions on those bylaws? Seeing none, I'll call the question. Those in favor? Anybody opposed to those bylaws? None. Carries unanimously. Go ahead, Deputy Mayor Ward.
Moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Thompson, that leave be granted to introduce the following bill, and this bill be read a first, second, and third time this day and finally passed. Bill 15.
Moved by Deputy Mayor Ward, seconded by Councillor Thompson, that leave be granted to introduce the following bill, and this bill be read a first, second, and third time this day and finally passed. Bill 15. This is the official plan implementing bylaw. Councillor Morales, go ahead.
Thanks, Mayor Lehman. I'd just like to declare a pecuniary interest on this, specifically as to the amendment on the affordable housing that was done to it, as it may affect me financially in the future. So at this point, I won't vote on this one bylaw.
Thanks, Councillor Morales. Madam Clerk, has Councillor Morales' conflict been recorded?
Yes, Mayor Lehman, it has.
Thank you very much. I'll call the question unless there are any comments or questions on the bylaw. Seeing none, those in favor of Bill 15, please indicate. Any opposed? None. That carries unanimously by those voting. Bill 17. Deputy Mayor
Moved
Ward.
by myself, seconded by Councillor Thompson, that leave be granted to introduce the following bill, and this bill be read a first, second, and third time to stay and finally pass. Bill 17.
Thank you. It's moved by Deputy Mayor Ward, seconded by Councillor Thompson, that leave be granted to introduce the following bill, and this bill be read a first, second, and third time this day and finally pass. Bill 17, the confirmation bylaw. Comments or questions? Seeing none. Those in favor of Bill 17? Anybody opposed? None. That carries unanimously. I'll take a motion to adjourn. Councillor McCann, seconded by Councillor Jim Harris. We are next in session as General Committee, as Planning Committee tomorrow night. City Council, however, will not be for 3 weeks, as next week is March break and there is no General Committee meeting next Monday. So we will see you for Planning Committee tomorrow night. City Building Committee is at 6, Planning Committee at 7. We're adjourned. Good night, everyone.